Don Paulson lives in Ouray, Colorado, and has been the curator of the Ouray County Historical Society since 2007. He is also a board member of both the Ridgway Railroad Museum and the Trust for Land Restoration. During the last 2 decades, Don has written dozens of articles and given numerous talks on southwestern Colorado history. He has authored or co-authored 3 southwestern Colorado history books: Narrow Gauge Railroading in the San Juan Triangle in 2009, Mines, Miners, and Much More 2015, and Peaks of the Uncompahgre 2016. He has also published Images of the Mountain West in Photography and Poetry 2019 with his wife Beth. Previously, Don was professor of chemistry at California State University, Los Angeles for 36 years. Don enjoys nature photography, model railroading, hiking, and jeeping in the San Juan Triangle. Don, the podium's yours.
It's a pleasure to be here with you guys and to be able to tell you a little bit about the history and the background of the Ridgway Railroad Museum. The Railroad Museum was founded in 1999 by 6 local narrow gauge railroad fans. Since then, we've grown to a membership of around 300. We have 5 to 10 volunteers that meet every Tuesday during the spring, summer, and fall for various restoration projects that we have going. And then we have an annual work week in June that attracts about 24 workers from all over the country. And we work on more substantial projects at our work week in June. And of course, we can always use more volunteers. If any of you are within driving distance of Ridgway, we'd be happy to host you for a day or 2. Our mission is to explain and interpret the significance of railroads in the history of this region by the use of a number of elements. And these elements include exhibits on railroad history, display of restored rolling stock and structures, a reference library. We have thousands and thousands of documents from the RGS and the D&RG. We have educational programs that we run for adults and for local school children. We have publications on railroad topics. We provide information to historical and modeling groups. And finally, we operate a number of different kinds of motor power. So what I want to do now is to go through some of the restoration projects, from the very first one to the ones that we're working on right now. Our first project was the restoration of D&RGW stock car 5574. This car was built in 1904 and rebuilt in 1926. Here's a picture of it in Alamosa in service on June 21st, 1943. Here it is in Alva, Oklahoma. That's Carl Schaefer and his wife, Judy, our president, picking up the car in 1999. We brought it back to Ridgway. We added a roof lock, brake wheel. We replaced rotted wood and repainted the car. And here it is in its restored condition. Our second restoration project was D&RGW boxcar 3130. It was built in 1904 and extensively rebuilt in 1926. It was retired in the 1950s and used as a grain storage shed in Colorado. Here it is being loaded onto a trailer at a ranch in Coloda, Colorado in 1999. We brought it back to Ouray. We added couplers, brake rigging, a new roof lock, trucks were added, and the car was repainted. Our next job was restoration of D&RGW drop bottom gon number 702. It was built in 1903 and rebuilt again in 1918 and again in 1925. Here is a picture of it in Durango when we purchased it in 2004. We brought it back to Ouray. We replaced some of the sideboards. We replaced all of the drop boards and painted the car. Now, during the work on the car, the late Keith Cook and I, who were in charge of the restoration, we had an argument about whether we should use the Flying Grand, which you can see down here, or whether we should use what we affectionately call the toilet seat cover. And so we compromised. We painted one side with the Flying Grand and the other side with the our so-called toilet seat cover over here. We did that. We've also done that to the Caboose, which I'll talk a little bit later about. We next worked on D&RGW work car number 04914. Here it is being transported into Ridgway in 2004. We put a new roof on it, new window frames, new windows, new doors, new roof walk, and a stack. And inside the car, we added a stove, and we have an exhibit on water tanks of the D&RGW and the RGS. Our most ambitious restoration project was Caboose 0575. 0575 was donated to the city of Ouray in 1952. It served as the Chamber of Commerce for about 20 years. In the early 70s, it was moved to a park in Ouray, and then for the next 40 years, they watered it faithfully every summer. And when we got it, it had lots and lots of rotted wood. We replaced all of the siding, as you can see here. We put in new windows, new window frames, new roofing. Here we are working on the siding. We put the same kind of red insulation paper that was on the original car. We replaced the end sills, as you can see over here. We repaired the side sills, the intermediate sills, and the center sill. And then we painted it. And here it is when it was newly restored. The next project is RGS Passenger Car 252. Now, this car had an interesting history. When the Rio Grande Southern was abandoned in 1952, our president, Carl Schaefer's father, Bob Schaefer, bought the car from the RGS, had it moved to Trout Lake, and for the next 10, 15 years, it was the Schaefer family summer cabin. Unfortunately, Bob sold it in the early 1970s. It moved to various places and eventually ended up in Oregon. And after Carl's parents had died, he used the money from their estate to repurchase the car and move it back to Ridgway. We've been restoring that car for the last 4 years, and here's what the car looks like today. It has a new roof, it has new siding, it has new trucks that cost an obscene fortune, were made by the folks down in Chama. The trucks just arrived a couple of weeks ago, and we had a lot of fun jacking the car up and shoving the trucks underneath it. And here's the interior. Everything you see on the interior is new. The windows, the clear story windows, I think I had a list up here. Obviously, new siding on the outside, new windows, new clear story windows, new authentic trucks. We have an original restored dual oil lamp, which you can see right in the middle of the front side of the car. That was donated by Jim Ehrenberger. And if anyone has a second one they'd like to donate, we have a hole here that desperately needs an oil lamp. We did completely new interior woodwork, and you can see that it has restored period seats in the car. It also has an operating air brake system because we hope to operate the car, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The very first motive power that we had was RGS motor number 1. I'm sure you know about this, but just to refresh your memory, in 1931, the RGS went into receivership and was in danger of closing. They had a mail contract for about $50,000 a year, and that was the only thing which was keeping it afloat. And they needed to run 2 steam passenger trains each day to take care of that mail contract. Each train required an engineer, fireman, conductor, and 1 or 2 brakemen. And Victor Miller, who was the RGS receiver, he conceived the plan, and Jack Odenbaugh constructed motor number 1. It was built in the Ridgway shops from a 1925 Buick touring car for about $850. It paid for itself in 3 weeks, and 6 more were built. Motor number 1 was scrapped, but the other 6 remain, and all of them are operable. So here's some pictures. There's only about 6 pictures known of the original motor number 1. And here it is at the Ridgway shops. In 1999-2000, Carl Schaefer did a nearly exact reproduction. He used a 1926 Buick touring car rather than the 1925. It has metal wheels rather than wooden wheels with steel tires. And here it is in 2012, running at the Colorado Railroad Museum. Now, RGS Galloping Goose number 4 was built in 1932. And as you can see, it has a Pierce arrow body and a freight compartment in the back. And then after World War II, the Pierce Arrow body was replaced with a Wayne bus body. So one of the questions most people ask when they look at this is that a school bus? Well, as you probably know, the answer to that is no, that is not a school bus. And how do we know it's not a school bus? It has a door on the passenger side. No school bus has a door on the passenger side. Kids getting out there would get run over by oncoming traffic. So they were actually troop carriers used in Army bases in World War II. Of course, then the railroad went bankrupt again in 1950. They tried to become a tourist railroad. You can see here they cut holes in the freight box. That ran for 2 summers, and then the railroad ceased to exist. Now, it is owned by the Telluride Volunteer Fire Department, and it was on display in Telluride for more than 60 years. We started a restoration in 2008. We were originally just going to restore it cosmetically, but when we got into it, we found out that we could restore it for running. And so that's what we did over a 4-year period. We stripped it down. These are actually automobile chassis frames that you can see here. On top of that, we built the subfloor, the flooring, then we rebuilt the box, and we actually used, if you look closely here, you can see that the vertical pieces are put in with mortise and tenon on this side, but on the other side, they're toenailed. So we reproduced what way it was built when we rebuilt it. Then we put the original tin back on. We also rebuilt the transmission and the motor. And here it is in 2012, operating at the Colorado Railroad Museum. And that 2-day event, we carried over 1,200 passengers. And here it is in 2015 on the Durango and Silverton, which it ran there for 4 days. Now, Goose number 4 is on display in Ridgway. In fact, today is the day it's being moved back to Ridgway. It's on display in Ridgway from mid-September to late May with rides every Saturday. And it's on display in Telluride during the summer months. Now, I've got a video here. We have built a half-mile loop that we can run our equipment on. And when we first started to do this, we started laying ties, and we decided that it would take us 50 years in order to finish the half-mile loop. So we actually hired some kids who work for a local nursery, and they did all of the laying of the ties. We laid all of the rails using a mammoth truck that Carl had. And in May of 2019, we had the golden spike. So here's a picture of Goose number 4 in Ridgway running. Oops, sorry, didn't want to do that. Let's go back. There we go. Here we go. You can see it kind of wobbles a little like a goose. Oops. Okay. The first steam engine that the RGS had was RGS number 93. It was built in 1879. It's a 440 built by the Baldwin Locomotive Works, and you can see the picture of it. It's in front of the Byrne shops in Denver. And Otto Mears purchased it in 1891 for $1,000. He renumbered it to 36, and it was used to pull Mears' private car, the San Juan, and also used as the pay car to pay the construction workers. It was sold to the Arkansas Lumber Company in 1900, and unfortunately, it was scrapped in 1916. However, it's going to rebirth. We are having an actual 440 steam engine built. This is the erection diagram. It's been under construction for the last 6 years, and the photos that we look at today, it actually looks like a steam engine. We were set back about a year because some crazy woman under drugs drove her car into the side of the shop at 100 miles an hour, killed herself, and destroyed the cab. And so we were set back about a year in the construction. It's an exact replica of number 36. We hope it's going to be delivered sometime next fall. It will be a fully functional steam engine. It will be being built by John Brown at Palisade, Colorado, and it will burn diesel fuel rather than coal. It will have 2 compressors in the tender, and we have a non-working historic compressor, which we have attached to the engineer side of the engine. So check our website. We'll have some exciting news fairly quickly about the number 36. And we hope to run it under steam on the Durango and Silverton on the Cats. Here's another interesting piece of equipment from the RGS. This is W.D. Lee's motor car number 1. That's built from a Model T. W.D. was the assistant superintendent from 91 to 92. He was the superintendent from 1892 to 98, and he was the general superintendent of the RGS from 1898 to 1903. Now, here's a picture of it on the Ophir High Line. It had some problems. When gusts of wind would get under this canopy, it would actually lift the T off the track. And there were a couple of accidents, and in one of them, W.D.'s wife was injured, and he never rode in it again, and it was very shortly retired. However, Lowell Ross began a recreation of this vehicle, and when he decided he didn't want to go any further, he sold it to us, and we completed it. And here it is. And I also have a video of it running at the museum. So let me turn off the sound here. All right, and here's the video. So it's a nifty little car. We also, in the last month, have purchased a little critter, which we call the CW, after Chris Weiser, who provided the funds to purchase it. It has a 1960 International Harvester tractor engine. It develops 92 horsepower. It has a maximum speed of 20 miles per hour, and it provides 2,500 pounds of tractive effort. And it was used at a Baraboo, Wisconsin power plant until 1995. And I also have a couple of videos of it. And again, we found the sound distracting. So here it is pulling our rider gun. We've actually pulled it with the gun full, so it actually does make it up that hill. We've also used it to run our caboose. And if you look at the side of the caboose, you see it says Caboose 91. This is the way the caboose originally looked when it was built in the 1870s. The other side still has the D&RGW 0575. But anyway, here's a nice little video of the CW pulling our caboose. Okay, we have a train shed. You can see that in the 2 pictures here. Keep our cars and rolling stock, et cetera, out of the weather in the winter and the rainstorms. The original D&RG RGS depot, you can see in the background. This little building right here is the shed for the Model T. We have one structure that was originally in Ridgway, and that's the outhouse coal storing here. The Ridgway Depot never had a regular bathroom, they only had the outhouse. It was used as a farm shed east of Ridgway, and it was donated by the Bovard family in 2002. We replaced the floor beams, added some siding, and replaced the roof. And here it is after its restoration. So this side was used for storage of coal, and it had men's and women's outhouses there. Now, the last thing that we built was a restoration and reconstruction of the Guston Depot. Now, the Silverton Railroad, not the Durango and Silverton, but the Silverton Railroad ran from Silverton up over Red Mountain Pass down into the Ironton Valley. This little depot, you can see the arrow right there. There's the depot, the loading platform, the outhouse. This is the Guston mine. If any of you have been to Red Mountain. This is the Congregational Church that you can visit up there. It's a pancake, but you can visit the site. So we set about to reconstruct this depot as Otto Mears originally built it. This is what it looked like in the 1970s. Now, unfortunately, someone bought the property and he bulldozed the remains over the side of the hill, not knowing what it was. Fortunately, he sold the property, and the new owner thought it would be fantastic to have a replica of the depot built on his property, and he gave us a conservation easement. So it was rebuilt in 2014-15 by the Ouray County Historical Society and the Ridgway Railroad Museum. So here is 2014. Now I want you to look at these are plans drawn by John Robinson, who lives in Denver. I want you to look at the beams here. That's a square post. This is a tree trunk. That's a square post. This is a tree trunk, a square post, a tree trunk. We used the same thing that Otto used. He just used whatever was hand. If he had a 12 by 12, he used it. He didn't have a 12 by 12, he used a tree. Later on that same year, we finished building the depot, the building itself. We gathered a lot of cut nails from the site, and we used as many of the cut nails as possible. We have a couple of pieces, this piece right here and this piece over here, that are original to the depot itself. And here it is in 2015 with about half the crew that built it. It has original 36-pound rail in front. We know it's original rail because we know that Otto bought used rail from the D&RG. It has the appropriate smelter stamping. We gathered spikes and rail joiners along the right-of-way, so we have original rail and original spikes and rail joiners. Okay, we have a number of educational activities. We do tours for school groups and classroom presentations. We do guided hikes and auto tours. We do newspaper articles. We have indoor displays at the museum. We got a lot of archived documents. We have a website which includes employee records, annual reports. We have every timetable that the RGS ever published. We have a monthly newsletter, and we have published a couple of books. So here's just some photos of local school groups. Here's Bonnie Cook explaining the goose to kids. And here I am explaining to the kids the importance of railroads in the development of southwestern Colorado. And here we have Carl Schaefer talking to kids about the goose before they get a ride. In Colorado, 4th grade is Colorado history, so all the 4th grade classes from the surrounding towns come to the museum every fall. And here's Carl explaining about the drop bottom gondola. I also give Silverton Railroad guided hikes. Here are a few of them. Here's a photo on the right-of-way of the Silverton Railroad. Here's the famous corkscrew turntable, which is still there. And just a couple other things. We got a lot of archive material. This is only a small sample of the archival material that we have. We have, as I said, every RGS turntable. We have it online, scanned. This is our workforce document. We have several thousand names of people that work for the RGS and the D&RGW. So if your grandfather worked for the railroad, you can come here, most likely find his name, find out what he did, and find out what document we used to verify that he was an employee. And we also have all of the annual reports of the RGS as well. We have museum indoor displays. This is a diorama originally built by Richard Dorman. His family donated it to us after Richard died. Keith Cook and I added some cars, some buildings. We set the time in 1948. You can tell that because there's the Ridgway water tank without a roof. Here's a model, a fine scale model of the 440 that we're having built. And here's the goose wall in one of our display cars at the museum. Now we have a 20-page monthly newsletter, which you get emailed to you as a member of the museum. Here's one of our summer June work week crews celebrating the week after Friday. We've published 2 books, Narrow Gauge Railroading in the San Juan Triangle, which talks about the 3 railroads which operated in Ouray County, the RGS, the D&RG, and Otto Mears Silverton Railroad. The second book was the history and restoration of RGS Galloping Goose No. 4. So if you're really an aficionado of geese, you need to get this. You can see 100 pages of information on how we restored that to operating condition. And finally, we'd love to have many of you as possible join the Ridgway Railroad Museum. Our memberships begin at $20 per year. You can do it by check. You can do it by PayPal. All you have to do is go to our website, ridgwayrailroadmuseum.org. And for any of you on the East Coast, remember that Ridgway has no E because it's named after Arthur Ridgway, the construction engineer for the north side of the RGS, and not for some hill in the vicinity. So come and see us at our Railroad Museum after the Denver Narrow Gauge Convention next summer. Come and visit us then. Love to see you. And thanks a lot for showing up and listening to my presentation.